Red Army Village, located on Ukraine's southwestern Donetsk defensive line, is now in crisis. Can it hold against Russia's sustained offensive? Today's briefing opens with a strategic overview of the war in Ukraine. After 1,272 days of relentless combat, Russian forces are nearing their stated minimum objective, full control of the Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts. As of August 20th, 2025, only 25% of Donetsk remains under Ukrainian control, suggesting that Russia may be within reach of this baseline target. Yet this campaign is not new. Russia's efforts to seize this territory have now stretched over 11 years. In April 2014, following the annexation of Crimea, conflict erupted in Donbas. Russia armed local militias and rapidly captured nearly half of Donetsk oblast. Part of Russia's current territorial gains in Donbas stem from that early phase, while additional advances during the full-scale invasion of the past 3 years have been incremental. Progress has been methodical, not sweeping. Prolonged fighting compelled Ukraine to construct extensive defensive fortifications across Donetsk, largely between major towns, but much of this line has since fallen under Russian control. Today, Ukraine maintains only a handful of strongholds: Pokrovsk, Kostiantynivka, and Red Army Village, now renamed Pokrovsk, which together form the last line of defense in Donetsk. Pokrovsk's location is strategically vital. Its original Soviet-era name, Krasnoarmysk, literally Red Army Village, has been replaced by Pokrovsk, meaning protection of the Mother of God, named after a former local church. This renaming reflects more than administrative change. It signals a broader shift in Ukrainian sentiment away from Soviet identity and toward an independent cultural and identity. Now this city, which once housed 30,000 residents in peacetime, stands under incessant attack day and night alongside its neighboring town Myrnorad, with Ukrainian defenders holding fast. Red Army Village has emerged as the defensive hub in southern Donetsk thanks both to its sizable urban area, supporting fortified positions, and its excellent transportation infrastructure. Anchored by the E50 highway linking Dnipro and Donetsk city that cuts directly through it, supplemented by roads like T0504, T0406, and T0515, while also functioning as one of the region's few rail junctions connecting Dnipro, Zaporizhia, and Donetsk, historically serving as a logistics linchpin for Ukrainian forces until Russian pressure severed its role. The rail network, now inactive, and supply roads under serious threat. As a small city, its dense high-rise blocks provide natural shelter against Russian fire, but losing Red Army Village would force Ukrainian defenses west of Donetsk into fragmented lines across villages and small towns with significantly increased difficulty. And for Russian forces, capturing it offers not only a western thrust into Donetsk's interior, but also the potential to encircle larger objectives like Kramatorsk and Sloviansk. Hence, since the full-scale invasion began, the battle for Red Army Village has been critically intense, with hostilities erupting in September 2023. Russia has deployed a total of 110,000 elite troops here, giving them at least a 3-to-1 advantage. After 6 months of brutal combat, they seized Avdiivka near Donetsk city in February 2024 and then pushed westward along the rail line toward Red Army Village, advancing 36 kilometers in a year and capturing Okeratyne, Herdivka, Novohirhivka, and Seladov before reaching the outskirts of Red Army Village in February 2025. This front line marked the fastest advance for Russian forces over the past 2 years, and a clear tactical success. Yet Ukrainian defenders, while forced to retreat, bought themselves a full 2 years of resistance against Russia's top-tier formations, significantly altering the battlefield. 2 years ago in Avdiivka, a 5-square-kilometer area was littered with over 100 Russian armored vehicle wrecks, emblematic of Russia's then-dominant armored assaults. But today such tank offensives are absent. Drones now dominate the battlefield, and Ukraine is not at a disadvantage in this domain, having established over the past 2 years a 5 to 10 km-wide drone interception zone across the front, deploying drones rather than infantry to compensate for manpower shortages. Red Army Village is one of the sites where this novel tactic is employed, though not the only one. In Sumy, Kharkiv, Kupiansk, and Chasiv Yar, Ukraine's drone defense tactics have matured, but focusing on drone warfare only narrows Ukraine's disadvantage, since Russia still retains its numerical superiority. Russian forces have shifted from deploying 5-man teams in armored vehicles to increasingly smaller assault units using 4-man groups in off-road vehicles, then down to individual soldiers on motorcycles and scooters. Yet despite the change in transport, they still maintain numerical superiority and simply adapted their mobility to the shifting battlefield. When these Russia's reinforcements combine with their drone units, Ukraine's defensive belt is far from impermeable. Unmanned aerial systems, while agile, remain vulnerable to concentrated electronic warfare, adverse weather, and limited visibility at night, leaving battlefield gaps that Russia continues to exploit. In late February to early March 2025, Russian units launched a southwest offensive from the outskirts of Pokrovsk, crossing the T-0515 highway and seizing the lithium-rich settlement of Shevchenko, with the spearhead pushing into Kotrelin on the T-0406 before being halted by Ukrainian defense, then pivoting northeast in May from Mykolaiv to take Ryazin and begin encirclement from that vector, culminating in late July with forces nearly reaching the T-0515 logistical node at Rodensku, and simultaneously launching direct assaults on the town center from the southwest via Zvirov, with multiple 150-person waves breaching into the urban core. At that point, the situation in Pokrovsk appeared nearly irrecoverable for Ukrainian defenders. Russian forces do, however, expose a critical vulnerability in their motorized tactics, with soldiers primarily traveling on foot or via motorcycles. Absent tank or armored vehicle support, they carry only minimal equipment and supplies, rendering them fragile once counterattacked. Ukraine launched a counteroffensive in Pokrovsk by concentrating drone strikes on dispersed Russian forces in both the town and surrounding Rodinska area, forcing those units to withdraw after several days due to supply shortages and enabling Ukraine to re-establish control over the town center and key transit routes. Drones, forming both a lengthy defensive line and directed counterattack arrows, proved pivotal in neutralizing Russia's limited infantry endurance. Yet the Russians adapted again. In early August 2025, they shifted their focus northward toward Dobropilya, a town 12 kilometers north of Pokrovsk critical for Ukrainian resupply via the T-0515 highway and housing the local Ukrainian Tactical Command, drone teams, and fire support assets. Deploying 300 to 400 troops in infiltration operations, Russian reconnaissance elements pushed as far as the T-0515 highway north of Dobropilya, with some units entering the town itself and prompting evacuation of the remaining residents. Though modest in size, such a force is significant in a drone-saturated combat zone. But despite these gains, the Russians continued to rely on small unit penetration tactics, using motorcycles rather than tanks, exploiting gaps in Ukrainian drone coverage. While they made tangible gains, these advances risk reversal upon Ukrainian counteraction, foreshadowing a repetitive cycle of tactical gain and setback. Starting in mid-August, Ukraine marshaled significant resources to counterattack Russian forces that had penetrated toward Dobropilya, deploying major units like the Azov Army, the 93rd Brigade, and the 82nd Airborne Brigade, but instead of launching blunt counterassaults, they employed a methodical drone-centric and long-range fire campaign to clear clustered Russian troops between villages with near-zero close-quarters combat, successfully pushing most Russian forces out of the Dobropilya area and restoring Ukrainian control of the town and its supply routes. Pokrovsk entered a temporary lull, but a lull before the storm, as despite repeated effective counterstrikes, Ukraine remained strategically reactive due to insufficient overall strength, such that even a 150-strong Russian force can breach the town center, and 300 to 400 troops can overrun Dobropilya. Yet Ukraine steadfastly relies on drone-based defense with no shift in core tactics. meaning the risk of Pokrovsk eventually falling remains high. Since the end of the Avdiivka battle a year and a half ago, Russia has held the advantage, making repeated breakthroughs through sheer capacity to absorb losses. Though Ukraine did earn invaluable time from Avdiivka to Pokrovsk in exchange for limited territory losses and lower casualties, and forced a transition in Russian tactics from armored thrusts to motorcycle-borne infantry penetration, a dynamic adaptation that Ukraine's drone-driven defense helped mitigate. The large-scale battle for Pokrovsk, which began in July and has continued into August 2025, is intricately linked to the impending negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. Both sides are striving to secure more favorable positions on the battlefield to strengthen their negotiating leverage and sway the undecided United States to their advantage. Russia aims to demonstrate that the remaining quarter of Donetsk can be swiftly captured, while Ukraine endeavors to prove that. This process is no easier than the past 11 years of conflict. Ultimately, only one side will be correct. Thanks for watching. See you next time.